My name is Ludwig Bull, and I'm the CEO of CourtCorrect. This is a very interesting conference format because I'm sitting here in my office in London, and I'm just talking to a screen because obviously coronavirus has happened and hence there is no in-person conference. But I hope that notwithstanding, this video will be interesting, and we'll answer some questions about technology in the law. So yeah, I mean, we've got a couple of cool things that I want to go through today, and I sort of promised the organizers of the event that I'd spend some time showing a live training of an artificial intelligence program to predict outcomes of the Swiss Constitutional Court. So we're going to do that. We're actually going to make an AI that does that, and I'll sort of show you live. And if you're a programmer and you're watching this for any reason, you can just follow on at home and you can build the AI. Yeah, so maybe before we start, I'll just tell you a little bit about myself as well and what we're doing at CourtCorrect, and maybe that's useful. And then we'll get on to the code right thereafter. So I'll just start with that. So anyway, my name is Ludwig. I'm originally from Germany. I've been living in the UK now for like 5 years, and I've been doing only startups in law, like tech startups in law, since I was a student. So I've really been doing nothing else other than that. My background is mostly as a software engineer, so spent like a lot of time building apps, building web technologies, building APIs, building products, cloud, DevOps, like pretty much everything that you have to do as a startup. And yeah, like with a lot of emphasis on AI, so built a lot of infrastructure there, collected a lot of data, mostly like used a lot of publicly available court data, and then really created some really good technology on top of that would help you predict outcomes of court cases. So I was doing that for a while, which mostly was in like the litigation finance space. So in German, that's Prozessfinanzierung. So it's, investing in legal cases based on their chances of success. And obviously for this, the AI is really useful. But now I founded CourtCorrect. We're a team of like 10 people now, and we have part of our team in Zurich as well. So we have quite a strong connection to Switzerland. And I'll tell you a little bit about what we're doing here. So, I mean, basically the idea behind CourtCorrect, this is really like the vision that we have for the world. And it's pretty simple, and I think it's pretty obviously good. So these are kind of some of the main tenets. One of them is that access to justice should be affordable, and it should be easy, and it should be for everyone. I think it's a fundamental aspiration and a very, very important thing, that everyone is able to get access to justice in a way that's easy and that they can afford. And that's not the world we're living in right now, because the world we're living in right now, we have a legal system that's too expensive and it's too complicated. So, everyone knows this. Legal bills are very high, court is complicated. It's a system that excludes a lot of people. And there's different reasons why it does that. And to a certain extent, what the legal system does just necessarily makes that happen, because, some disputes are really complicated and it just is expensive and it is complicated to solve them. But, the vast sort of majority of people who have legal issues, they're not really in this system. They're just private individuals. They never interact with the law. It's too expensive. It's too complicated for them. So we want to change that. We really want to build technology so we have like replace here, right? To replace the justice system for consumer disputes worldwide. And replace is maybe not the right word, because we're not replacing it. We're just building it. It's not there right now. There is nothing really to replace. A lot of consumer disputes are not being adjudicated, are not being dealt with in a way that's fair or just. It's just, we want to build a system for this. So that's really our vision. Our vision is about making justice affordable and easy everyone. So how does this whole thing work? So let me just talk a little bit about like our ecosystem. And I'm just going to try and see whether I can move this so you can see the whole screen. Let's see. I'm not even sure whether this is part of the recording. Oh, we'll just leave it. We'll just go from here. But you can sort of think of, this person that you see on the slide here, kind of in the center. And this is just, let's say, a normal human being, just a person who has rights. And the sort of the immediate area that he's connected to, this person, these are all the different areas of law that they interact with. These are like what their main rights are, the main legal issues they have. So you've got property, rental and ownership. I mean, that's a huge one, right? People rent property, people own property, and by property, I mean, houses and flats and land. You've got finance, people take on credit, people take on mortgages. You've got insurance, right? Like medical insurance, contents insurance. You've got things like utilities, which is like energy contracts, broadband contracts. People have legal relationships with those companies. That cost money, that sometimes costs a lot of money, and that cost like a lot of money over time, because obviously those are really long-term contracts. You've got digital companies, digital services where there's legal relationships like social media, search, constantly we're accepting terms and conditions online. There's a legal framework that governs how we interact with those companies. We've got shopping, obviously. Every time you make a purchase, you're entering into a legal agreement with the company that you're buying something from. And there's consumer protection legislation that sits on top of that and makes sure it's all good. We've got state, legal relations with the state, citizenship, right? Democracy, protests, crime, tax, right? These are all important legal relationships. And finally, work. You have an employment contract. You may do an internship. You've got a legal relationship with the entity that you're working at. So those are all of the legal relationships that people have. And behind all of those legal relationships, there's sort of companies or other players, right? So you've got like landlords behind property, you've got banks behind finances, you've got like telecom companies, energy companies behind utilities, you've got insurance companies, you've got tech companies, you've got online shops, you've got all these companies that sort of sit behind those legal relationships. And what we really want to do, or what we already are doing at CourtCorrect, is we are digitalizing those relationships. We're digitalizing all of people's legal relationships. And we're doing that in two ways. We're doing it from the center out. So we start with people and we give people access to their rights. We give people access to legal information. And so we start with them and sort of tell them what their rights are. We also do it from the outside in. So sort of, go like bottom up approach. And then we've got the top to bottom approach. And this is really where we start with companies. So we work with companies, we work with law firms, we work with all sorts of companies to help them make their legal relationships with their customers clearer, stronger, better, more secure, compliant, etc. So we're really going from two different directions here. And we've been building this for a bit, but this is really like the whole ecosystem in which this sits. Maybe some just macro points about like what that means. So, I mean, right now we're obviously in a situation where coronavirus is reshaping the economy in favor of technology businesses. I mean, I think that's obvious to everyone. Litigations and legal problems are typically negatively correlated with recessions because people and businesses look to liquidate claims. People don't have much money in recessions or have less money, so legal problems tend to rise. And then also rights are currently in the political spotlight as social and economic tensions are released worldwide in movements like Black Lives Matter. It's a huge political focus right now, the rights that people have. So because of all these macro factors, we think that it's a really good time to be building a technology company that focuses on people's rights and helps solve legal problems. Yeah, please build the future of justice with us. So, I mean, I don't want this to be so self-promotional because I really just want to share like interesting things that I'm thinking about and that I'm kind of working on. But we really love working with people, and if you want to work with us, just get in touch. Anyway, let's move on to like some of the code side of things. But I'll also show you just like what CourtCorrect looks like. This is all online and live. I mean, it's just at courtcorrect.com. You can just go to this website right now and you can find it. So let's look up like tenancy as an example. So, it's a search engine for legal information. Tenant rights for private tenancies. This is for the UK. You can click on this and then you get your rights. Your rights are, so for example, you have the right to live in a property that's safe and in good repair. And that means that your landlord must keep the property safe and in a good state of repair. And coronavirus has not changed this rule. Specifically, what this right means is that your landlord must do these following things. So they have to carry out an annual gas safety check, check the electrical fittings, and ensure all furniture they supply is fire safe and that there's an alarm. So, they've got all these different rights here and also responsibilities. So this is really, how we think of legal information about like rights. And that's really where we're currently at. And what we're also building now is we're building a couple of mobile applications to really put this, to give people access to this via their phones. Yeah, so that's CourtCorrect. What we're going to do now is we're going to build an AI that predicts the outcomes of real legal cases in Switzerland. And this will be, the court we're looking at is the Bundesgericht, so the sort of top constitutional court. And the point of like showing you this is really, we're gonna build a model, and I just want to give you very concretely a real example of how you can build this and what it looks like. What does AI even look like in code? Because often I find in legal tech, it's all in the clouds, it's like what we could do, or here's an idea, but this is the thing, right? Like we're actually building the technology, and I'm just going to explain a few things, and I hope it's interesting, but I think it at least will be very concrete. Okay, so what we're looking at here essentially is a Jupyter notebook. This is a Python program. So this is like an editor within which you can write Python code, and it's split into these different cells, and you can basically run each cell sort of on its own, and that will, that sort of runs the code in this cell. So first we're going to run this cell, and then we're going to write the next cell. And obviously I'm not going to write the whole code now because there's loads of code here already. So I'm just going to sort of I wrote it sort of before the presentation, and we're just going to walk through what it does and how an AI works and so on. So the first thing we're going to do is we're just going to load the data. This is this first cell here, and loading the data really just means we have a certain data set. This is the data set that we created. It's based on, it's just downloaded all of the publicly available court data from the constitutional court, and we ran some programs on that data in order to extract certain parameters. So if you imagine like the document is like online, it's on some court website, and then you can write a program that goes to that website and then goes to all of the other court cases and just downloads the text. But obviously what you get first is just text. So you only have like a big block of text. So the data that we're working with, we've already extracted some parameters from that text. So the parameters we've extracted, you can see them here. Well, we'll just take a look at them. And yeah, let's take a look. So one of the parameters we've for example, extracted is whether the judgment, so these are all court judgments, whether the judgment was abgewiesen, so whether the claim was rejected, or whether it was gut geheißen, so if it was accepted. So this is one of the factors we've extracted for each of these court judgments, each of these court cases. So I'm just going to run that, and so we've sort of created labels. So as you can see here, if outcome equals abgewiesen, then labels load, that's our variable, dot append 0. And if outcome equals gut geheißen, labels load dot append 1. So if we now count how many times we have, the label 1, we just have to let it run for a little bit, because it's actually right now, it's actually loading the data, right? This is live. This is not pre-prepared. This is right now loading the data. But what we'll see is what we're going to do in a second is we're going to, load these labels. So, right, so now we've counted how many times we've had the label 1, which is for gut geheißen. We've got 12,336 of those. And how often the label is 0, we've got 49,810. So in total, we've got like 62,146 cases, and the vast majority of those are abgewiesen. which makes sense because the Constitutional Court typically rejects most of the claims brought by people. Only a small minority is actually accepted. So the first thing we're going to do now, so that's like our data set, right? So we've got like, we've got like all of these labels, and let's also have a look at what one of these, texts looks like. So I'm just going to insert a cell below, and we're just going to look at like texts load. Just look at one of these. Okay, so this is like what one of the one of the pieces of data really looks like. So each piece of data, each court judgment essentially is going to be represented as, this text. It will have this text, and then it will have a label. And the label, as I said, is like whether the case was won or lost, gut gewiesen or abgewiesen or gut geheißen. And then the text that's associated with that is just this. So that from the whole judgment, from the whole court judgment, this is all the stuff we extract, and that's it. So all we have is like the length, and this is just like in here as text format. So each of those data points is just like, one of the things we've extracted. First thing we've extracted is the language of the case, then which part of the Constitutional Court it's in, Strafrechtliche Abteilung, Strafrecht allgemein, Kantonsgericht Zürich, so that's the lower court. Then it's undefined. So whenever you see undefined, it just means for that particular court case, we couldn't actually define that particular parameter, so we just have it as undefined. Schonknecht, M, Roland, Max, Schneider, Hans, Bibrechtigers, these are all names. I think these are the names of the, so we have like names of the judges, we have names of the lawyers that are involved and so on. And we also have their sex, whether they're male or female. We have their party affiliation, SVP, etc. And then we have a couple of other parameters, which we'll have a look at in a second. We have also the defendant and the claimant in most cases. So here it's die Staatsanwaltschaft des Kantons Zürich. And this makes sense because this is a criminal case. So anyway, so just imagine our data set is like a table where on the right side, we have, all these labels of like 0, 1, 0, 0, 0, 1, which just means like case was gut geheißen or abgewiesen. And on the left-hand side, we've just got this text for each of the cases, right? All of this text. And this text is just essentially a representation of these are just like the parameters that we've extracted from the court judgment, right? So we have the court judgment, we extract these parameters because we're trying to like predict something that will happen in the future. So we need to exclude everything from the input that we're putting into the AI that we don't know for a future case, because obviously we're working with court judgments, but you don't get a court judgment until the case has been decided. So when we're putting something into the AI, we have to make sure that we're only putting things in, giving the AI information about things that we will know for future cases. And for future cases, we don't have the judgment yet, but for future cases, we will know, which part of the court it's in, who the lawyers are, who the judges are, what their party affiliation is, who the defendant is, and so on. So we're only using this data. We're not looking at any legal information. So this is a really, really simple model. We're only looking at like metadata. We're not looking at any legal information. The AI we're training now will know nothing about the facts of the case, about the law. It knows nothing. The only thing it knows is like the names of the lawyers, names of the judges, party affiliations, defendant, and so on, sex of these people, etc. And we're going to see how good we get. Like, this is just a very simple model. And again, the idea here is not to sort of tell you this is what you have to do, but this is just to give you an idea of what you can do. And obviously, if you want to build a better model, you can add everything. You can add loads of information about the law and about the facts of the case and so on. But we're going to keep it super, super simple for this example, just to sort of show you how it works. Okay, so this is right. This is all the information we're giving it. So the first thing we're going to do now is we're going to make sure that all of the cases in each category have an equal amount of cases in it, because we've got like 49,000 cases that are won, or sort of that are lost, and we've got 12,336 cases that were won. But if we're going to train a model on this, we want to make sure that both are the same amount, because otherwise, the model will just always see a case that was lost. So if it always says loses, then it will just get, so many more right, because most of the data is actually of lost cases. So we want to have a balance. We want it to have equal amounts. So that's what this code does here. This just like makes sure that we have the exact balance. Okay, so now we're going to do it again. This is like labels 2, that's our new variable. And we'll see, okay, labels 2 with count 0, we have 12,336. And labels 2 with count 1, we also have 12,336. Now we've got exactly the same amount of cases in each part. Okay, so now we have our data set done. We've got our data, we've got like same amount of cases on each side. And now we're going to run a model. So this is a, what is this? This is a convolutional neural network. No, it's a bidirectional long short-term memory network. So this is a particular family of deep neural network models, which is typically used a lot in language problems, language classification problems. For example, sentiment analysis, like predicting whether a comment is good or bad, like a comment under a photo, whether it's a positive review or a negative review. And we're kind of feeding it the same data here. We're just feeding it, a couple of pieces of language, a couple of words that all just represent certain things about a court case, like the names of the people involved, their parties and so on, like what you saw earlier. And now we're just going to ask it to try and correlate, that data with the output. So it's going to see one of the input cases, that data that we showed you, I just showed you. Then it's going to learn, okay, this case was 1. And then we're going to do it again for another case, the next example, and it's going to learn, okay, this case was lost. It's just going to do that like for a large part of the cases in the database, and it's just going to try to learn that. And we're not going to show it all of the cases. We're only going to show it like 90% of the cases. It's going to train on those. So we'll always like have the input of the parameters, the data we put in, and there's going to be a prediction, and then it will know whether it did the right prediction, and it will kind of learn. But we're going to keep like another part of the data completely separate. We're going to take like 10% of the data away, and we're never going to tell the model what the real answer is. For the 90% that we are going to show it, the model will know what the right answer is, and that's how it learns. But then we want to know whether it really learned it. And in order to know whether it really learned it, we're going to show it data where it doesn't know what the answer is. And we're just going to ask the model to tell us, what do you think the answer is? What is the prediction for this data? And then we can check how good and how accurate the model is on data that it has never seen before. And that's how we know how good it can extrapolate to other cases, because we're only training it on 90% of our data, and we're keeping 10% away so that it can learn from this, but then we can test how good it is at understanding other cases by looking at, the 10% that it hasn't seen. So I ran this model right before the show, and we got to like, and again, it only has information around, of like that we showed you, right? Like that I showed you, it's only like, it doesn't have any legal information or factual information. And we got to an accuracy of like 60–70%, like this is 67% here. I think 67% is as good as it's got, which is like not great, but I mean, 67% accuracy in the prediction of, legal cases in the Swiss Constitutional Court without any legal information, without any factual information, knowing only the names and the identities of the people and parties involved and, like their political affiliation is, I would say, pretty impressive. I think it's actually quite crazy that it gets this good at all. But we're just going to run it anyway, so you can see how it works. And this takes a lot of time to run, and, there's so much we're not doing on any of these models. Like if we had like a few hours or so, if we spent a lot more time optimizing this, we could maybe get to like 80%. I've gotten a lot higher than 67%, but I did want this to be live. So what you're seeing now here is it's starting to train, right? So this is just like a summary of the model that we have. So, we've got 24,672 pieces of data, which is just 12,336 times 2. We've got a total of 600,000 parameters in this model. This is like the parameters that it's optimizing. But it's not like a very large number. There's some models have billions of parameters, so this is not necessarily that great a model. And as you can see, we're training on 22,205 samples, and then we're validating on 2,467 samples. So this is this 10% that I was talking about, and this is this 90%. And you can see it's right now we're getting this loss and this accuracy value. And this is just the loss and the accuracy on the training data, right? So this doesn't really mean that much in terms of how good the model is. This just shows like where the model is learning the data set. But every time one of these epochs finishes, we'll also get a validation accuracy. And this is the accuracy of the prediction on data it hasn't seen, right? And accuracy is just like total number of correct predictions divided by total number of predictions. So yeah, and now it's training, right? And in the first iteration, it got to 63.4%. You know, you can, whether that's a good number or not. I mean, again, like given that there's not much information, I think it's actually pretty impressive. But you know, if we let this run for like a long time, it would get pretty good. And again, we're not giving it any legal or factual information, which is something you definitely want to do if you're trying to build a model like this, you know, for like a real world use case. Right. So anyway, we're just sort of finishing up presentation here. And as you see, we've gotten to like over 67% accuracy on predicting the outcomes of Swiss federal court decisions with nothing except for the, you know, names, sex, and party affiliation of all the people involved. So I think that's quite extraordinary. And anyway, I think this sort of brings the presentation to a close. Maybe to sort of summarize, while this is still training, why I kind of opted for this format. I mean, my advice to anyone who's doing something in legal tech and to any company that's in the legal sector and wants to, wants to think about how the future looks like. And I mean, right now it's a crazy time, and pretty much every business in the world is reconsidering how, you know, their business looks and how their business is run and what they can do to really thrive in this new world. And my advice to anyone who's doing this is simply get started, like build something. Make it concrete, you know, don't just like talk about it and think about it, but actually start building something. And I mean, it's very much like a startup mentality, I think, because at a startup, you just like start building stuff. That's just what you do. And, you know, large corporates maybe sometimes don't tend to do that, but they really should, because that's how you really make progress. And that's really how you define sort of the world and of what you can do and where you can take things. So anyway, those are my 2 cents. And yeah, I hope that was a useful presentation. If you've got any questions, feel free to email me. My email is just my name, Ludwig@CourtCorrect.com. Yeah, and I wish you all the very best, both for you, your business, and your health for the upcoming year. Thank you very much.